Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. Is India justified in demanding that Dow Chemicals be dropped as a sponsor of the London Olympics? And could this lead to India boycotting the games themselves? That's the key issue I shall discuss today with the Sports Minister, Ajay Maken. Mr. Maken, your ministry has written to the International Olympic Committee asking for Dow Chemicals to be dropped as a sponsor of the London Olympics. On what grounds are you making this demand?
Well, if you look at the International Olympic Council's charters, they have put in 7 fundamental principles of Olympism. And the first fundamental principle of Olympism says that respect for universal, fundamental, ethical principles. And then they have 6 fields of activities. One of them is sports and environment. So they are linking with a company which has a track record and which is a successor company of Union Carbide, and I don't think ethically they can claim to sponsor an event.
This is the key point people contest. What has Dow Chemicals done that makes it ethically unwarranted as a sponsor of the Olympics? Name what they have done that makes it unethical.
Dow Chemicals is a successor company of Union Carbide. And Union Carbide was responsible for Bhopal gas tragedy.
So you're saying that Dow Chemicals has inherited the responsibility that Union Carbide had?
Absolutely.
All right, let's explore that, because that is in a sense the very basis of your argument. And let's begin by examining whether Dow Chemicals actually has a legal responsibility for what happened in Bhopal in '84. Let me put it like this.
Yeah.
Given that in 1989, the Supreme Court of India negotiated a full and final settlement, which the Indian government accepted and which on 2 occasions was upheld by the same Supreme Court on appeal. What legal responsibility remains?
Now I am not going into the legal side of this case. It is the moral responsibility of a successor company. I am not talking about the legal responsibility as such. Is not Union Carbide successor company Dow Chemicals morally responsible for what wrong Union Carbide had done?
I'll come to moral responsibility. But are you therefore saying that you accept the point that
no,
there is no legal
So.
responsibility?
No, I am not saying so. Please don't put words in my mouth.
So
What I am saying is I am not going into the legal side of the case. I am trying to say, since the IOC themselves say that they are to respect the universal, fundamental, ethical principles. When they call about the ethics, when they call about the morality, isn't it the moral responsibility of a successor company to pay for all the bad things which Union Carbide had done?
The problem with moral responsibility is that in the absence of legal responsibility, you can't enforce moral responsibility.
Well,
that's why I'm asking you again, do you believe that Dow Chemicals has a legal responsibility which they've inherited from Union Carbide?
We are not writing to the Dow Chemicals. We are writing to the IOC. And we are asking IOC, just because in the spirits of Olympics, the spirits of Olympism, they should not tie up with a company which has a history of Union Carbide behind it.
Well, okay, I will explore moral responsibility because that is your key issue.
Absolutely.
But first, so that the Indian audience who are listening to you can understand your position, let's for a moment look at legal responsibility.
No, but why legal responsibility?
Let me point out a fact.
Legal responsibility, I think you should talk to the chairman of the GOM, which has been formed on this Dow Chemicals issue, how to tackle it legally.
Except that
as a sports minister, we have complained to the International Olympic Council.
Okay, let me then at least get you to agree to certain facts. Leave legal responsibility aside, let's just agree to certain facts. Do you accept that A, the Supreme Court of India in 1989 negotiated a full and final settlement, which the Indian government accepted and which was twice upheld on appeal?
I am not going into that.
But are you denying it or are you accepting it?
I'm not going into that at all. What I'm trying to say is that the moral responsibility lies with the Dow Chemicals. That is it.
All right.
Because it is a successor company of Union Carbide.
Okay. You don't want to go into legal responsibility, but I just want to point out for the audience that there are certain facts which you're not disputing. You're not disputing the facts, you're not going into them either. You're not disputing
but you should. Do you agree that it is the moral responsibility of Dow Chemicals?
Well, let's come to moral responsibility.
So if morally they are responsible, then IOC, I'm saying IOC should not partner with a company which is morally responsible for an environment disaster.
Let's then question whether there is moral responsibility.
Absolutely.
Given that Dow Chemicals only acquired Union Carbide in 1999, 15 years after the Bhopal tragedy,
then what?
What moral responsibility can there be?
Even now, the people in Bhopal are suffering on account of that incident.
Well, no, this is the point.
So even now, if they are forced to drink water which is contaminated because of the Union Carbide in 1984, is not Dow Chemicals morally responsible for that?
No, Minister.
Should IOC,
No, Minister,
IOC on one hand says that sports and environment is their one area of activity.
Minister,
so sports and environment, how can they ignore?
No, permit me to answer your question. You're saying that Dow Chemicals is today responsible for the fact that people are still suffering. Let me finish. Let me finish. You haven't let me finish. The truth is that in 1991, when the Supreme Court heard the first appeal on the 89 settlement, the Supreme Court of India said that if the settlement is incomplete, the responsibility for the shortfall will fall on the government of India. That is your responsibility,
I'm again saying it is. I'm not going into the legal aspect of the case.
The moral
responsibility again is the bill.
No,
it has inherited.
No, Minister.
It has inherited
there is
a successor company.
No, Minister. This is
now the Supreme Court has again reopened the case. Is it not before the Supreme Court again?
The Supreme Court has not reopened the case.
Is it not before the Supreme Court again?
For the third time.
Yeah.
Twice the Supreme Court has upheld the original judgment.
If it is before the Supreme Court again, then this means that the matter is still pending before the court.
It hasn't gone to the Supreme Court in the sense that the Supreme Court has itself opened it.
In whatever
Your
sense
government has brought it. The Supreme Court has given no
for
opinion.
us, then for the government it is still a dispute.
Minister,
then this means that the government still has gone to the Supreme Court.
We're going into an argument.
The court is still looking into this aspect.
Let me finish my question before you interrupt me. You're saying that there is a moral responsibility because there are people still suffering. You're saying that moral responsibility has been inherited by Dow.
Absolutely.
I am pointing out to you that any responsibility for the fact that the settlement is incomplete was adjudicated by the Supreme Court to fall on the Indian government. Therefore, let me finish. Therefore, if there is a moral responsibility for the fact that people suffer, that was given by the Supreme Court to the Indian government, not to Dow.
But the Indian government has gone to the Supreme Court again now. So the matter is pending before the Supreme Court again.
The Supreme Court hasn't answered.
No, but it is before the Supreme Court.
Answered, and you don't know what they'll say.
So then it is a hypothetical question as far as to what Supreme Court will say, whether it will say or not.
You've created the hypothesis.
It is not.
No one else
What
has.
I am trying to say is that legal aspect. Why do you go into the legal aspect? It is still pending before the court. Let us go into the moral aspect, which is settled.
You keep.
The moral aspect is settled, and the moral aspect is.
Minister, the point is that the moral aspect is A, not settled. Secondly, the moral aspect is actually vitiated by the legal position. You don't want to consider that. But let me point out something else. You keep talking about moral aspect. I first pointed out to you that Dow had only bought Union Carbide 15 years after the event. You've ignored that.
No, then
There's a second fact.
If a crime has been committed, if something wrong has been done, how does the time matter?
In 1994, Union Carbide sold Union Carbide India to an Indian company called McLeod Russell, which today is called Eveready. If there is moral responsibility, it's gone to Eveready.
No. Then again, has Union Carbide not been sold to Dow Chemicals?
But after they had sold Union Carbide India to Eveready.
Then what?
Therefore, if there's moral responsibility, it laid with Union Carbide India, that's gone to McLeod Russell. That is today Eveready. It's an Indian company. Why aren't you appealing to Eveready?
No. Let me tell you again, now, Mr. Thapar, that the present status is that as far as the Indian government is concerned, the matter is in the Supreme Court. We have filed the case before the Supreme Court. That is the legal. It is still on. As far as the moral responsibility is concerned, we feel that moral responsibility on Dow Chemical, it lies on Dow Chemical. That is why we have written to the IOC.
Let me tell you this. You know, even if I were for argument's sake and purely for argument's sake to accept your claim that there is moral responsibility, the problem with moral responsibility is that it is undefined. More importantly, it is vague and vacuous, and you are trying to make it actionable. How do you make something actionable when there is a dispute over the very definition of moral responsibility?
It's a sports event. And it is a spirit of Olympics, the Olympism which is being promoted through this Olympics. And in Olympism, the first thing is universal principles on ethics and morality.
Minister,
so when it comes to ethics and morality, when it comes to environment, how can you forget?
If the ethics of Dow in your eyes, if the ethics of Dow in your eyes are so questionable, then how do you account for the fact that Dow has 11,000 employees in India in 12 locations?
Well,
let me finish.
Mr. Thapar, I am a sports minister. I am a sports minister. I am talking. We have written to the International Olympic Council for withdrawal of their agreement with the Dow Chemicals.
Why don't you terminate your relationship with Dow in India first?
Let the other ministers respond on that. As far as the sports ministry is concerned, as far as the Olympics is concerned, we have
this
very
is
strong.
Hypocrisy.
No,
You're taking a stand on the Olympics where your case is weak and
because,
vacuous. But where Dow is actually involved with government work in India, you're not taking any stand at all.
We are taking a stand on Olympics because of the Olympism, because what Olympics says, because what the Charter of Olympics says.
Have you become the arbiter of what the charter says? The International
No, not
Olympic
arbiter.
Committee is disagreeing with your
it is for
interpretation.
everyone to see.
The point
it is for everyone to see.
There's
The
not a
principles of Olympism. The first principle, as I said, is to promote ethics.
Yes,
ethical
and the
values.
very company that you accuse of being unethical is working with the Jaipur Foot Project, drinking water in Gujarat, housing in Maharashtra where you're in power, flood relief in Bihar, 11,000 employees in 12 locations. You're not terminating any of that.
Are they playing in Olympics where the universal principles of ethics is the main thing on the basis of which the entire event takes place?
All right, let's take a break at that point. Let's come back and ask, if the International Olympic Committee rejects your request or demand to drop Dow Chemicals, then what will you do? That's in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and a fiery interview with the Sports Minister on India's stand that Dow Chemicals should be dropped as a sponsor of the London Olympics. Minister, if the International Olympic Committee were to reject your request to drop Dow Chemicals as a sponsor, what will you do?
It's a difficult question, a hypothetical one, because we do not know.
Very likely it's exactly what will happen, because when the IOA wrote to them, they wrote back on the 16th to say no. So they're likely to say the same thing.
Now, since the government of India has taken it up, and I think that they'll respond favorably, we have not yet decided.
But if they don't, what will you do?
Well, we have not yet decided.
But you must surely have a plan.
We do have a plan, but why to divulge the plan now?
Let me put two things to you. First of all, newspapers are speculating that if you get a no from the Olympic Committee, Indian officials will boycott the opening and closing ceremonies.
No, we have not yet decided on that.
But are you considering it?
We have not yet decided anything.
Are you considering it?
No, I can't say anything on that.
Okay, so it's a possibility that officials may boycott.
No, I can't say anything on that. What I can say is that we'll keep into our mind the sensitivity of the feelings of Bhopal people as well as the feelings of the players. So we have to somehow.
Let me put it like this: if at the end of the day, as newspapers are speculating, officials were to boycott the opening and closing ceremonies, I ask you one simple question: what purpose would that serve? Do you think anyone in the Olympic Committee cares whether Indian officials actually turn up or not?
Well,
they laugh at you.
Mr. Thapar, I would not like to answer anything hypothetical. We do not know what the answer would be, first of all. Secondly, how can I divulge what steps I am going to take 5 months after now? So still,
you mean, just a moment, you mean to say you may not decide for 5 months what you'll do?
Well, if to boycott the opening or closing ceremony, the decision can be taken just two days before the opening ceremony.
So in other words, uncertainty will hang for 5 months more.
But the players will be preparing.
Just a moment. The players will be preparing, no doubt, but there's a second issue. Is it possible that India may boycott the games themselves?
I'll not like to say anything on that.
So that's a possibility.
I'll not like to say anything on that.
But you're not ruling it out.
I'm not saying anything on that.
Quite right. So when you say you're not saying anything, once again the uncertainty or the possibility of a boycott remains.
I'm not saying what I have said. I think you should read into what I have said. We have to take into our mind the sensitivity of people of Bhopal, as well as the players who are preparing hard for the Olympics.
Which of the two is more important, the sensitivities of Bhopal or the interests and concerns of the players? Which is more important?
Let me tell you, for us, we will not like to choose anything of the two.
Let me put it like this. Every single Indian athlete hearing you will say that the minister is not ruling out a boycott. Therefore, there is uncertainty. Is it fair for this uncertainty to hang over the heads of athletes?
You asked a very good question. We are going full steam as far as preparations for the London Olympics are concerned for the players.
You may be going full steam, but there is doubt that you put in the mind of athletes.
There is no doubt amongst the players. They are going full steam. We have put in the best coaches, and we have put them at the best places in the world.
Minister, no doubt you've made the best facilities available and the best funding and financing available, but you put doubt into the minds of the players. Now, every individual player will say to himself, is it worth myself putting my heart and soul into preparation when at the end of the day, India may boycott?
We are putting pressure on the IOC to withdraw or to scrap this agreement.
And you and I know that pressure is unlikely to be successful. They've already rejected you once. They've already rejected you once.
They have rejected IOA. But I am still hopeful. I am still hopeful that we'll be able to find a solution.
You know something? You can't be that hopeful because the letter was written by a lowly joint secretary. If you were that hopeful, you would have written the letter yourself.
No,
you
no,
haven't
no.
even put
In the
your
past
name
also,
to the letter.
Listen, the joint secretary is the Ministry of Sports joint secretary. Joint secretary writing a letter makes it official. A government of India joint secretary.
And there's a big difference between a joint secretary and the minister writing the letter.
In the past, we have engaged with the IOC number of times.
Minister,
and always it is the joint secretary who writes the letter.
If you were serious, you would have written to the chairman of the Olympic Committee yourself.
It's not so. I don't think you are
Let
right.
me come back to my thing.
Because in the past also, let me clarify this, in the past also on number of other issues, always the joint secretary of the ministry writes to the IOC president.
All right. Many will say it's a very Babu approach to the problem, but leave that aside.
Not this one. Earlier also, not on the Dow issue, other issues also.
But the point that I'm driving at is that the uncertainty about whether India will boycott or not remains. And players are going to find it difficult to motivate themselves to put in that extra effort when there's doubt over the games happening.
If I say anything now, I'll be deflating the pressure which we are trying to put on the IOC.
But you're increasing the doubt in the minds of the players.
No, that is not we are going to do because we are taking care of that aspect.
How can you take care of doubt in people's minds?
We have talked to the players, the coaches, and we have asked them. They have to prepare themselves fully.
But
there is no doubt in the minds of the players.
But they won't prepare themselves fully when the minister won't rule out a boycott.
No, it is not so. They are preparing themselves. They are preparing fully. They are going full steam.
Let me put it like this. It seems to many that this campaign is being waged at the cost and at the interest of Indian sportsmen. How do you escape from that accusation?
Well, everything, finally, you'll be able to say once we take a decision. You can't.
Which you say you may not take for 5 months.
May or may not.
That's the point I'm making.
saying may or may not.
But I'm
saying the outer limit. I'm not saying now. I'm saying it is the outer limit. I'm not saying that we'll not take any decision
now.
I
understand it's the outer limit, but the point still doesn't change that this campaign is being waged at the interest of Indian sportsmen.
No, it is not so. It is not so.
Let me put it like this.
Our hockey team performed so well despite the letter.
And they may not end up at the Olympics if you don't remove the doubt.
No, that is the different thing. That is the different thing.
Let me put
what I have said is that final decision will be taken both keeping in mind the feelings of people of Bhopal and the players.
Minister, the Indian hockey team qualified with some brilliant matches in the qualifiers to be able to compete in London. India could also win medals in shooting, in tennis, in wrestling, in boxing. Have you consulted the athletes whose medal prospects are in doubt whether they support a ban or not?
Well, we'll consult them only once we take a decision to boycott.
In other words,
before that, how can we take we start a consultative process before we have taken a decision?
Why can't you? Why can't you say to Indian athletes this is a moral issue? Are you in favor of a boycott of the Olympics or not?
If we start discussing with them, do we not create confusion in their mind?
At least you're honest to them. At the moment, you're not even being honest and upfront.
You want us to be honest and create confusion.
Do you know what you're saying? You're saying that you'll only consult them after a decision is taken.
No, once we have decided, we can boycott.
Once you've decided,
we can. As I have said, we do not have any options now.
Will the final decision lie with athletes and what they want, or will it lie with the government?
Whatever final decision will be taken, athletes will be consulted, and
will they have a veto since it's their future at stake, not yours?
Athletes will have a very important role to play in that decision.
What's a very important role?
Very important role. You may say veto, but I say very important role.
What if the majority of Indian athletes, when you consult them, say, no, we've been preparing, this is a once and for your chance, we want to go? Will they have the final say?
It will have a very important bearing on the decision we take.
Now, what does very important bearing mean?
What you are saying about veto, it is very important, almost means veto in your words.
It almost means a veto.
In your words.
So what you're saying to me is at the end of the day, athletes will determine whether India boycotts or not.
What athletes think will play a very important role in our decision.
Let me put this to you. The Secretary General of the Indian Olympic Association, Mr. Randhir Singh, has said to me that the association is against a boycott. They want Dow dropped, but they do not want India to boycott the games. Will you also listen to that voice?
Well, the first thing, if it happens, the second thing would not be required.
But if the first doesn't happen?
Then we'll think about the second thing.
But as you said to me a moment ago, the voice of the athletes will play a dominant role.
Absolutely.
As you also said to me, it's almost as I'm putting it, a veto.
That is what you are saying.
And you're not disagreeing.
Saying dominant role or most important role.
Dominant role or most important role.
Yeah.
Minister, a pleasure talking to you.